Good morning. My name is Bryan Maguire. As Pádraig just said, I'm the Head of Qualification Services at QQI. As a Wexford man, it's always a relief for me to get out of Dublin and meet people in the real Ireland, so I'm very happy to be here in Cork today and to talk to you about our comprehensive policy consultation on qualifications and quality assurance. There's an awful lot in this document, hundreds of pages, so I'm going to start with what I hope is a familiar image of the National Framework of Qualifications. Certainly it's been something of a consolation to us as we work through the extensive new legislation that we actually have something to hold on to that's an important piece of continuity, and that is indeed the National Framework, which has now been in place for 10 years, which is becoming increasingly familiar not just to people who are insiders in education and training, people who are providing, but also is being used by employers, by people working in education, in guidance, by people working in planning, in statistics, and various other policy areas. So the National Framework is an important piece of continuity between where we've come from and where QQI is looking at going to in the documents considered here today. The QQI, as Pádraig said, I don't expect you to be able to read this from the stage, from where you are down there, but this is actually, it's in page 5 of the first green paper in here. And it's actually a depiction of the range of relationships that QQI has. We are a very wide, broad church. On the right-hand side, it depicts the various kinds of providers we deal with. As Pádraig says, these stretch from universities and their linked colleges. There are public higher education providers like institutes of technology. There's private colleges. There are English language teaching organizations. There are training organizations, employer-led organizations, training opportunities, and so on. So there's a whole range on this side. And then on the left-hand side, there's all the other people that we deal with. We deal with other awarding bodies. We deal with public agencies. We deal with regulatory authorities, professional recognition bodies. We deal with international authorities, and we won't be talking a lot about these in the current consultation, but the international recognition of our qualifications is something that we'll be dealing with in a future green paper and consultation exercise. So what we have is a very wide range of actions, interactions that we have with these different stakeholders. Some of them are set down in law, and some of them are things that we have to, roles that we have to negotiate and develop in partnership with you. This is an even more complicated diagram, which you're even less likely to be able to read. This one is found actually not in the bunch of papers in front of you, but there is an ancillary paper we've produced, a background paper on the qualification system. And the point here is that whereas in the previous diagram QQI was at the center of things, kind of a little bit egocentric on our part, from this view, this is about how the qualifications and education and training world interact with each other, interact with the labour market, interact with regulated professions, interact with lifelong learning, with occupational standards, and so on. And in a picture like this, QQI is actually one of the small little boxes down here in the bottom right-hand corner. This is to sort of an antidote to our delusions of grandeur, that in fact we recognise that we are a small organisation and that the key parts of the system are things that are going on out there. There's 5 of us on the stage and 200 of you out there. That's probably not quite the right proportion, but you get the idea. We are just a cog in this quite complex machine of education and training. And what we're trying to do is, however, to bring coherence to the education and training world and the different parts and levels of education and training, as represented in the national framework, which for the first time brought under a single diagram all 10 levels. Now, under QQI, the quality assurance of everything outside of the school system is brought under one roof with QQI, the external quality assurance. There are a number of different routes into the framework. On the one hand, there are designated awarding bodies, universities, DIT, RCSI, some of these bodies that have by law their own degree awarding powers or qualifications awarding powers. There are a number of bodies that have delegated authority from QQI, so that get their awarding authority under the Qualifications and Quality Assurance Act, and those are at the moment the institutes of technology, though the legislation provides that in the future there may be other bodies with delegated authority. There are the direct awards that are made by QQI. These are the awards that you will be familiar with as FETAC and HETAC awards. Of course, the Further Education and Training Awards Council and the Higher Education and Training Awards Council have now been dissolved. We don't refer to these councils anymore. These are no longer awards of the councils. They are QQI awards. We do use the labels FETAC and HETAC for the time being while we engage in consultation and development to look at what the future is going to be, and some of these questions are touched on in the green papers that are for your consideration today. But these are awards which many of you will be familiar with, which are made directly by QQI following direct, and there's a very direct quality assurance relationship and validation relationship that QQI has with providers of programs leading to these awards. And then there are a number of awards that are recognized in the framework, and they were recognized under the previous regime by NQAI or by either of the awards councils. And these are awards either of Irish awarding bodies, like professional bodies, or of international awarding bodies, like City and Guilds or EdExcel. And these awards are also in the framework, and the new legislation makes much more explicit reference to qualifications recognized in the framework, because over time being recognized in the framework, as I said at the beginning, has come to be used by wider society. It's not just an internal quality assurance tool, but it's used as a signal really of good quality, of reassurance to learners. And so it's also used by employers, it's used by funding bodies, it's used by bodies who are seeking to use qualifications. So it becomes quite important then to have as many routes as possible to quality assured qualifications in the framework. All of these routes, depending on what level you're dealing with, are available. So universities, for example, validate the awards of certain private institutions. Institutes of technology have collaborative arrangements with other providers. QQI is the direct route, but also many providers have relationship to the framework only by virtue of operating with awarding bodies whose qualifications are recognized in the framework. The relationship with QQI is therefore an indirect one, and that's an equally valid way of being recognized in the framework. So these are the 4 different routes to recognition in the framework. The previous slides I've shown have either had QQI at the heart of things, or had the framework at the heart of things, or that very complicated diagram was hard to know exactly what was at the heart of things, it being a complex adaptive system. And you can find more details about that in the background paper, which is on our website. But really, at the end of the day, we want learners to be at the heart of what we're doing. And the new body that was established, the governing body for QQI, the board has 10 members, and unlike the previous councils, they're not representative, with 2 exceptions. And the 2 exceptions are learners. There are 2 representatives of learners on the board of QQI. And this signals really the centrality of learners and learner interests in the intent of the legislature in establishing QQI. And so we have to look at how learners' interests are reflected in what we do. That, in the first instance, is, as I say, being represented in QQI decision making, being consulted on our policy development, having input into quality assurance activities. We have a lot of freedom in how our quality assurance activities are developed. But one of the things that is laid down in the legislation is that quality assurance procedures have to include feedback from learners on the quality of the education and training they have received. So we have input. So we serve learners by ensuring that they have input into quality reviews, by providing information and ensuring that the information given by providers of education and training is reliable and accurate, by providing protection for enrolled learners who hand over fees to private providers, that in those instances they will be guaranteed the opportunity either to finish out if something went wrong with the provider's business operations, that either they will be able to continue their course or they'll get their fees returned. That, of course, fundamentally, it's serving learners by having access to awards in the framework through those different routes I spoke about, and also by having proper recognition both domestically and internationally for their qualifications. We also have a responsibility to international learners who come to Ireland for study to establish an international education mark so that they can have confidence in coming to this country to get an education. And all of these functions are different ways in which we provide a service to learners. Inasmuch then as you, if you're providers, you serve learners, we will be able to serve you. And how we're going to serve you, that's something that my colleague in Head of Quality Assurance Services, Bryan Maguire, is going to talk to you about now. Thank you.